Welcome to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation's Conversations at Home program. I'm Piya Sinha-Roy. Before we are joined by our guest today, I want to let you know that the SAG-AFTRA Foundation is a non-profit organization that relies entirely on donations to provide emergency assistance and free educational programs to the SAG-AFTRA artists. This conversation is made possible thanks to the generosity of our supporters. Over the past year, the foundation has given over $6.5 million in COVID relief to more than 7,000 performers. If you're a SAG-AFTRA artist and need help, please ask. And if you can help, please give. Information can be found in the description of this video. Thank you for your support. Now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Hailee Steinfeld and Jane Krakowski from Dickinson. Hi, so good to meet both of you. I'm really excited to get into Dickinson because it's such an interesting take on the genre, and I really enjoyed watching the kind of evolution of the characters in season 2. So I'm going to kick off with, this is a question for both of you, but what were you both excited to do with your respective characters that you hadn't been able to do in season 1, but really got to dig into in season 2?
Ooh, I go first.
Yes,
I think for me, season 1 for Emily was all about winning the right to become a writer, to be able to call herself a writer, comfortably to herself in front of her family. And so I was very much looking forward to kicking off season 2 with having won that right to become a writer. My father in season 2 is far more accepting of it. And I'm able to, sit in that room at that desk and not feel like if somebody comes through the door, I have to immediately hide what I'm working on. I was always in my room writing, and that was a very known thing and accepted nonetheless, but as far as, the family went. Also, season 2 dives into this whole world of technology and celebrity culture and fame. And that was a fun thing to explore, given what, we see in that as far as all that goes now. I was looking forward to doing, digging into that as well.
Yeah. And Jane, for you, how did Mrs. Dickinson evolve for you this season?
Well, in season 1, Mrs. Dickinson was definitely representing the old school guard. Obviously, the device of the show is its anachronistic take on the world of Emily Dickinson. But in season 1, I think Mr. and Mrs. Dickinson had to represent the traditionalism, the patriarchal society. And they did that very strongly, what their beliefs were for Emily. In season 2, I was very, very pleased to see Mrs. Dickinson take her hair down, so to speak, and become more in the device of the whole show, of becoming a bit more of a modern woman, and literally letting her hair down, clearly growing a bit hornier in season 2 and fully more accepting of her daughter and the more modern choices that she wants to make.
I definitely think that, when I know that this series is framed around a coming of age story for Emily Dickinson, but I actually think Mrs. Dickinson, is going through that same process as well. It's really fascinating to see the mother-daughter evolution.
That's so interesting you say that, because I do believe that the character is having her own reckoning as well, and continues into season 3, which hopefully we'll talk about at another time. Yeah. But the realizing that a woman can be a woman and not under the patriarchal stamp at all times. And I think she learns that from her daughters, making their own decisions and not following that pattern that has been very set up by society. And so in a way it is, even though they're very different generationally, it's nice to see that they both have a blossoming, so to speak.
Yeah. I'm curious to know, Hailee, for you, what did you find particularly compelling within Emily's struggles in this season, especially when it came to the concept of fame? Because in the first season, she was, as you mentioned, sort of doing her writing in secret. In second season, she's starting to get published and there's a fame element and she struggles with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one thing I was comforted by to be playing someone that feels so decisive, who writes what she writes and doesn't hold back in the slightest. She touches on every possible subject that she can think of, shamelessly, unapologetically, at that point knowing that nobody's reading it, right? But she writes as if no one will ever read it, and it's unbelievable that people got the chance to do so. Because I feel like, as a side note, that's sort of this new approach that I have been inspired to take with my work in general and with writing specifically. But I think I found it quite interesting, right, that there is a world in which she must have questioned whether or not she really wanted something like this. Having spent the majority of her life in one space, writing for a select few, it's crazy to think that she might have gone back and forth on the idea so much.
Right.
But I think that, in season 2, she's confused by the glitter of Sue's new life and the, allure to being published by Sam. But in the end, she reaffirms that, her true artistic soul wants to write for love and not fame. And that is the whole journey of season 2 that we are taking on.
I mean, she's also going through this kind of intense emotional roller coaster. She deals with the death of someone she came close to. She has this all-consuming crush. How do you think those things start to impact her in this season?
I mean, they impact her greatly on so many different. I mean, she ultimately hits a point of writer's block, and that's something that she has never experienced. She puts her hand down to the paper and it has a mind of its own. And suddenly she just sits there staring for anything longer than normal. And she doesn't know what's happening physically and emotionally and mentally. There are so many changes happening, and she is consumed by this person and by that person, and confused with this and that, and frustrated and excited by and intrigued, and there's so much mystery that comes with Sam Bowles. And, are his intentions pure? Is he interested in her or the work? Is Sue pushing her towards something that is, for her benefit or for Emily's? It's a lot. So it impacts her greatly, to the point of a huge roadblock, literally and figuratively.
I do. Yeah, I think it's so interesting to see, sort of have those lines filled in that we didn't really ever know about the real Emily Dickinson. And so to be able to go back and reimagine what her life could have been is so fascinating in these moments. What do you find within a character that what do you connect to specifically within playing her that you enjoy so much?
I love the idea. I mean, first of all, to use her poetry as such a driving force. One thing I love so much about her poetry in general is that I truly feel like I never understand it the first few times I read it. And that's what keeps me going back to it, is just this like determination of figuring out what the heck was going through her mind. And to be able to make this show and dive into what we think that might have looked like has been so fun. And to play a character that felt so ahead of her time and so just ahead of the curve, so to speak. And I don't know, I go back to Alena Smith all the time on this, because she has had she has this unbelievable ability to almost see into the future with this show. I find that with each season, I am either in that moment in my life or we are in that moment in our time. And whether it confuses me or helps me come up with a better understanding, it's challenged me nonetheless. Each and every day, this show has absolutely challenged me and tested me. And I am so grateful for that, because even with coming into season 3, it's like, just when you think, we'd be comfortable, and we are, and we've created such a beautiful foundation and such a wonderful family that I'm so grateful to walk away with. But it, just when I think I'm like, okay, season 3, I've got this down. I know this character. I like get the first script and I'm like, oh boy, what a lot to unpack here. And I've never not felt that way about this show. And I think that's the best thing ever. It's really kept me on my toes.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating to see those kind of parallels into our current society. And I think that's what, this show does so brilliantly. Jane, I wanted to ask you kind of more specifically about how you, and perhaps you and Hailee, talked about Mrs. Dickinson and Emily's relationship this season. I always feel like they have these really great tension-filled, like, back and forths. And I wanted to know, kind of what you felt like you wanted to dive deeper into between the two of them.
Yeah, I feel like me personally as an actress always looks for the comedic side of the scenes, and what I can find within this time period and where the comedy lies for that and for what Alena is going for and what is on the pages. I think what I was most thankful for in season 2 and what I loved, because it made Mrs. Dickinson a much more fully rounded person and a more real person, because once we got to know a little bit of her heart and her own insecurities and her own true feelings, that you can then, I felt from early on in season 2, once she exposed some of her genuine feelings and fears, that we were able to then follow her story and her person a lot more, because she became much more of a real person, not just a comedic device, not just a person who flies through the scene and does something funny here or adds some of the plot here. She actually became a more fully developed human and character that we care about in season 2, with the scenes that delved deeper into her feelings and her heart. And I felt extremely lucky to have gotten the scene with Hailee in the spa between mother and daughter, because I think that developed our story so much. In season 1, we definitely had to be a bit at odds. And Mrs. Dickinson had to stand for her traditional beliefs that you get married off young and that you move on. And I think actually the character of Emily Dickinson Jr. makes Mrs. Dickinson a more modern woman. Emily Dickinson Sr., the part I play, makes her much more of a modern woman by learning why Emily is the way she is and allowing her to be who she is. And I was very moved by that, like allowing your children to be who they are. Don't try to transform them into who you want them to be or what you think they should be. Let them live and thrive as who they are. And I think that was a big moment for Mrs. Dickinson to realize it and to step up and still be a good parent, knowing that it was not going to go that way. And I also love all my scenes with Hailee, because Hailee is such a brilliant actress, super fun to be with, incredibly professional, but she tells the truth all the time. And she demands that you find the truth too. And I greatly appreciate that. I think we can still have all the humor and all the fun as well, but it's nice to be able to find the truth amidst all of that. And I think Hailee demands it, and I thank her for that.
I love that. Yeah, I think it's great when you're able to sort of push each other to those moments where you can find that true authenticity in a scene. I'm curious to know, are there any influences or any like inspirations you kind of look towards for both of your characters? Anything that you wanted to draw from specifically and weave into your portrayals?
Thanks, Jane, for saying those things. I would say I've just really become more fascinated than ever just by human behavior in general. And I feel like I have picked up on so many just so many things in the last few years of making this show that I've been able to take just from living in New York City and being in the best place to go have lunch by yourself, and the things you'll see. I feel like there were quite a few references that I had that I would literally call Alena and say, this is happening. I just saw this or whatever. And she's like, great. We have that montage thing where you can do that thing in the mirror and you can do exactly what you just saw on Instagram or whatever it was. I felt like I was able to pull in a lot of things that I had become a lot more aware of going on around me, which was kind of fun.
That's cool. Yeah. Jane, for you, was there anything you were looking towards or weaving into your performance?
Sure. I think for me, I like to pull from the truth of my own feelings about different things. And I think in season 2, Alena wrote a few topics that really struck a chord in me personally. And I think a bit like Hailee, through conversations that we had about our characters early on in season 2, because the characters took quite a jump from the end of season 1 to season 2, we all, I felt, needed to have a dialogue with Alena Smith to see where she wanted our characters to be, and then for us to have that as a jumping off point for us to keep going. And I had many talks with Alena about how I wanted to dive more into who Mrs. Dickinson is deep inside. And I think I personally just had a very strong connection to women of different generations who didn't have the same opportunity that I have had and that Hailee will have even more of. And I think that influenced me a lot with Mrs. Dickinson. In season, absolutely representing repression of women and those types of women. And generationally, there are always those blocks, but we're getting closer and closer to having less of them. And my mother particularly just sort of missed women's lib and feminism. And I think she always has a little bit inside of her that is a little bit bummed that she kind of just missed that opportunity. And I think I see a bit of that in Mrs. Dickinson, as well as I want to be able to break her free of that and let her find freedom and advances and modernism in the world and the constraints that she has.
Right. Yeah. That absolutely makes sense. And I think it's so, you bring up Alena a lot, obviously. Alena Smith is the creator, showrunner. And I'm really curious to know what, what I love about the show is that it does break through a lot of the molds and the traditions of even like period drama and comedy, like genre, tropes and things like that. So I'm curious to know, what you feel Alena brings so uniquely to this story and why she's kind of the person to tell it.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I would love to, she is I'm like speechless when I think of how she even could have come up with, how she continues to come up with this, these concepts for this show, for characters specifically. She just constantly blows me away. And her and I have been sidebarring quite a lot this last season we've been working on, just about how much we've accomplished and through these characters, who lived in a time where not a whole lot went on. in outside of their what happens in their world. I should say there's quite a lot that happens, but Emily going out into the wider world is her going across the street to the Evergreens. I mean, it's we weren't working with a whole lot, but she just continues to blow me away and coming up with these concepts, or not even concepts necessarily, but she touches on all these subjects that are still so prominent and still so important and still so worth talking about and hearing about and watching. And one thing that got me from the very beginning with this show was how it just doesn't hold back in that sense. She really has done such a beautiful and tasteful job of telling so many different types of stories within this one. There are so many types of relationships and struggles and obstacles and ups and downs, and there's amazing humor, and there's the reality of the time that they were living in, which was not funny and which was not wonderful and comfortable and glamorous and desirable. And she gets it all. And she got a wonderful group of people together to execute it all. And I'm very proud of all of it. But I mean, why her and no one else? I can't even think. This has been her thing from day one. I mean, it would be amazing.
It's absolutely her baby. I mean, she studied Emily Dickinson for a very long time. She's very aware of her life and the findings over the years of what people believe was Emily Dickinson's life. And I believe, I mean, maybe 5 or 6 years even before we got made on Apple TV Plus, she was already having this idea and knowing that she wanted to make it happen somewhere at some time. And as Hailee says, she got an incredible group of designers to make that whole world come to life so beautifully. A group of interesting, wacky, different, comedic, serious actors to portray all of the people in this world. One of my favorite things is all the guest stars that we've had. I mean, we have like these incredible people from comedy, from stand-up, from other shows you love in different walks of life come in, and they nail like a historic person in the most crazy way you've ever seen that person be depicted. And I'm always like, really? Like John Mulaney's coming? Like always like, that's amazing. Like that. And they always get to work with Hailee, which is awesome, being the center of the story. But I'm like, I always want to come in and at least meet them in the trailer. Yeah. You say hi as a fellow fan.
Yeah, I do think it's amazing to see kind of this story and how it's shaped. I want to ask you a little bit about that because, you know, breaking with the kind of traditions of the genre. And I love, Hailee, that you're saying that, you know, sometimes you're sort of looking at the things around you in your present day, Instagram, whatever, and then weaving those references back in. Tell me a little bit about kind of playing with the, you know, kind of, there's so much sort of conversation around authenticity of time period, but I actually like that you kind of break with that and you bring the authenticity of a present day time period into that. So just tell me about that process of weaving present with period and how that works for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun to think about the fact that, I mean, who says that people didn't curse then, right? I mean, they might have had their own curse words or different curse words, but they still got angry. They still are human, you know, and had ways of dealing with things that, you know, it's just fun to think about how they might have done that and how it might not have been so different than how we deal with things today, right? Given their obvious circumstances, which we do take into account, the language is probably the most modern thing about this show. And at times where I have maybe bumped with a line here or there because I'm like, okay, this is like what kids 10 years younger than me are saying. I'm going to have to really figure this out. It's something that it really does help you know, tell this story in a way that feels real and even more relevant than it might feel if it was this, you know, very strictly period show. And it's been so fun to have conversations in the hair and makeup trailer about how we can maybe, you know, push the envelope a little here. And Emily had a very, you know, very specific, from what we know from the one photograph that we've seen of her, that center, that very dead center part with a low bun over the ears. My hairstylist that I've been working with for 3 years on the show now, him and I have like looked at each other at times and we're like, okay, how can we spice this up a bit? And we'll look at modern references and we'll look at period references and we'll kind of merge the line as best we can to keep it so that we're still telling the story in a way that doesn't feel distracting. But it's just been really fun to sort of weave those references in throughout, you know, with the language, with the wardrobe, with the hair, all of that.
Yeah. It's just fun to watch because it feels very kind of its time, but also, and it's also, I guess, tapping into those themes that are universal and timeless as well. You know, like a lot of the struggles that Emily and Mrs. Dickinson have gone through back then are still kind of relevant today. And so it's great to see those threads being woven through. I'm curious to know, and Jane, you touched a little bit on this with the guest stars, but I'd love to know, you know, for both of you, you know, what were some of your favorite sequences, or is there one favorite sequence that you particularly love filming this season?
Three things come to mind. I'll ramble them off quickly. One, the fact that Wiz Khalifa is a part of our show is quite possibly the coolest thing ever, and I will never get over it.
I love that.
Anything I have with him ever is just like the stories that come out of it. There are moments that I'm like, I wish I had a pen and paper right now to write this down. So wonderful. He is amazing, and what a cool thing he brings to our show that nobody else could. The whole spa situation was really a lot of fun. We were I don't even remember where we were, Jane, maybe you do. It was a very random place, and it was far, and it was weird, and I think it was like raining outside, and it was, there's a whole bunch going on, and we were all in this small space ultimately, at times. But we were just running through these crazy montage bits, and it was just so fun. And one of those moments I had on this show where I'm like, one moment I'm having a conversation with death, the next moment I'm having this unbelievably vulnerable conversation with my mom, and the next I'm getting like pounds of water dumped on my head, and like, just one of those things. And then last but not least, our opera episode, I think, is the most special, one of the most special parts of season 2. The scope of the episode alone is just unreal, and I think it really pushed us all to go to another level. And that was a moment too where, the majority of this show is shot either on a stage or one particular exterior location. And anytime we get to venture out of that, it feels like a field trip, and it's so fun. We're kind of outside of our what we know, and it's fun to kind of, immerse ourselves into a new sort of world. And where we shot, that was so beautiful. And it was just, the costumes there were unbelievable. I remember hearing about them before we started shooting the season. It was all about the opera dresses. And by the time we got there, it was just a really beautiful and exciting thing. But the acting in that episode from everybody is so superb. And the story, everything sort of comes to a head in that episode. And I love it a lot. Anyway, those are my answer.
Those are good ones. Yeah. Jane, I'd love to hear yours.
Those are all great. There are some, individually for the characters, like for growth of character, I enjoyed being in the hole with Mr. Dickinson. And the hole was one of those scenes where we're like, what? We're going to be in a dirt hole? On the page, it wasn't that understandable. And the director of that episode happened to have also shot in a hole on another show, and so she knew how to make and shoot in a hole, which I was like, wow, what are the chances? So that was really memorable, and that was a big growth moment, I thought, for Mrs. Dickinson. The opera was just on a whole nother level, and it was fun for all us to sort of be on this field trip of bringing our show to a new, grander level, and all being together in the most special design terms that we sort of bring to the table at Dickinson. I loved the spa because it was with all of our ladies, and Jessica Hecht, who I love, who plays my sister. I think she brings such an essence to every role she plays, and I was so thrilled when she was going to be playing my sister. And she sort of takes charge in that episode and as our guide. And I think she set a tone for the comedy in that episode, and I certainly followed suit, and I think we all did. I, for some reason, can't get out of my memory you being drenched with that water. It wanted to be like Flashdance, but it really was more of a torture device. And they made you do it a bunch more times than I thought they would.
Yes.
And they, that's when I love it, when the whole team pitches in, meaning Hailee's game, that it's shot stunningly. The design team went out, I thought, hit it out of the park in that spa, with it being, is it therapeutic? Is it abusive? Is it you just didn't know what it was? Is it sadomasochistic? I'm not sure what it all was, but it lived in the world of the story and told the story to a higher level of style. And we did that one a lot, and that was fun. It was fun for us all to get our final relief as women and then say, we're fine, we can go home now. The times were crazy then. But yeah, there's so many moments. Sometimes the moments are just when we're in our home base and we all have to find what the scene's about. And whether it's just telling the truth around our dining room table, where we have a lot of scenes there, or in our parlor. And to me, the work of that, of finding what the truth is for all of our characters and getting to bounce off of each other. Certainly, I have a great actor playmate in Toby Huss, who probably, if I'm right, Hailee, makes us all laugh the most in between.
I mean, it's absurd.
Because he says words like no one else does them. He says things weird, and we all think it's funny. And so, yeah, there's all those joys, and every episode ends up having a slightly different tonal sensibility of all the directors that come in and bring their sensibility and their talents to our show. The one scene I wish I was in, and Hailee knows this, and I don't know if I'm ever going to get a chance on Dickinson, was the big dance number that your choreographer did at the end of season 2.
Oh, man.
I was obsessed. Why does it become 100 times cooler? At least it does to me in this world, when we're wearing the corsets and those outfits and they start like doing that stop beat stuff, and you're just like, it's so cool. It's a little bit like having Wiz come into our world. It's such a clash of styles that to me it brings it to such a cool factor level.
Yeah,
I think Hailee promised me I was going to get to learn that dance with her personal choreographer at some point.
It's gonna happen, Jane.
It's still on the table, right, Hailee?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I won't ever show anybody, I promise.
I don't know. I think we would like to actually see that. I'm sure there's something in the story we could hopefully see that with in the next season. But yeah, I get what you mean by it. I think it's just elevating the genre so much by being able to weave in, other influences, and I really love seeing that. I'd love to ask a little bit about the set and what it just sounds like. It's obviously such a great cast, and you guys have a lot of fun. Is there one particular person who has surprised you the most, perhaps either with their performance or behind the scenes?
Oh, Jane, I don't know.
I mean, Toby's the jokester of us all.
Which I love.
Yeah.
A little unexpected.
I mean, I don't know about it because I didn't get to work with these people, but I do think some of the comedy, the high level of comedy guest stars that have come in has been very unique. And Hailee usually has the highly intensive time with them. Right. Because the character of Emily is always the one that goes off with them, whether they're real or imaginative in her mind. I'm not saying that right, but you know what I mean.
No, you are. It's so funny. I have to say, I can't wait to talk about season 3. That is very much where my mind is right now, and there are answers that I have for you pertaining to season 3 that I can't wait to share with you. But I will say, as far as I don't know. It's very hard. I have to say that one thing that has occurred to me more during season 3, I think that has been happening through 1 and 2 as well. As I mentioned before, this show touches on subjects that are equally as funny and wild and absurd as they are heartbreaking and tragic and dark. And I think that regardless of where we are at on that spectrum when we're shooting, the moments in between takes are always kept alive by whether it's Toby's jokes or whether it's us sidebarring or whether it's us constantly having this rapport that has only become stronger. It's easy to, I've been on things before where, they call cut and then there's like a couple it's awkward, silence, or there's just, weird energy in between, and you feel awkward. And then you have to jump back into something. And weirdly, where I think in between takes, we've had people on set where I feel like they're like, man, they're so not, staying in it, but we are. I think it's about keeping it alive, and we really feed off of each other. And I feel as though I have, leaned on all my castmates, with this last season, just with all the history that we now have and the growth that we have all experienced as people, but more importantly in this case as characters. It's been really wonderful to have everybody kind of really find their own in this show, and I think that's kind of cool.
No, I think that's awesome. I have to say, I really actually love seeing the kind of evolution of Emily and Sue's relationship, especially in season 2, because both of them individually go through so much. And I'm just curious to know kind of, what you sort of, how you interpret that relationship and what you guys wanted to portray with it in season 2.
That relationship between Emily and Sue is unlike any relationship I've ever played out on screen. It's so heartbreaking and so beautiful and so messy and complicated. And even in its most complicated moments, there is such a true love there and a true alignment and connection and understanding that Emily has nowhere else with anyone else in her life. And I, have realized that that's a hard thing to come by too now, and Ella and I, since day one, have, and only more so as time has gone on, but we've had this really wonderful opportunity and ability to have these conversations with each other about what we want this to look like and what we want this to be. And of course, with Alena having written all of it so perfectly on the paper, it doesn't feel like we've had to do a whole lot because it's there. But it's been really great to, have these scenes that do continue to challenge us that we see on the page and we think, okay, this is what sets a whole lot into motion here, and we'll do a few takes of something and look at each other and realize that this isn't it. This isn't what we want it to. We know what this stuff looks like now. We know what we want it to feel like, and we know what we want others to feel from it. And we challenge each other to do what we know we have to do to get there, because we know what that looks like for us and for this show now, or at least we have an idea. So it's been a really, really beautiful thing to play out and to continue making discoveries about, and a relationship I will forever be grateful I got to play through.
Yeah, I love, and you're right, we don't get to see these kinds of relationships, but it feels incredibly real, I think, for many of us, a lot of our friendships with the women in our lives, I think that's probably, to me, what felt so compelling about this show. Watching those two and the journey they go on is beautiful, and I really love it. So we're coming up to the end of this, so I really want to look forward now to season 3. I know you can't say too much, but you've certainly teased it, and I'd love to know, kind of what you are both excited to do with your characters, and obviously as this world gets a little bit bigger, what you're both sort of excited to do and what you're both looking forward to doing. Like Jane, for you, what could we maybe see with Mrs. Dickinson in this next chapter?
I have to say I am thrilled with season 3 because I think Mrs. Dickinson has a lot of gold. I've been given a lot of beautiful scenes, a lot of wonderful comedic moments coming up in season 3, and a lot of great time with the key cast members. A lot of wonderful scenes within our core group. In season 3, and the biggest gift of season 3 is that we were even able to make it. We Absolutely. Are filming it amongst the pandemic, with all the pandemic rules in place and protocols, and our crew is tirelessly standing for 13 to 15 hours a day wearing masks. We're all getting tested and swiped and everything they've got to do 3 to 4, maybe sometimes 5 times a week when we have to make sure everyone's healthy. And so the greatest gift of season 3 is that we were able to make it, and we were able to make it now. And that means it'll come to everybody sooner rather than later. And I think it was such a great time for all the main cast members to really bond. We now do know our characters, and wherever Alena wants to take them, we understand them deep enough to be able to fly with wherever they're going to go. I'm personally very thankful for the beautiful scenes I get with Hailee in season 3, and I'll let Hailee tease more the other way, but I'm really looking forward to everybody seeing that too.
I just have to absolutely agree that the greatest gift was being able to make this thing. I've never experienced in my career being able to live with a character for this long, and I think that is a gift in and of itself as well. I do feel so, like Jane said, we know these characters now, and we can play with them in ways we haven't been able to in the past because of how well we know them. But this season, I am particularly excited for people to see the growth in Emily. There has been a tremendous amount just between seasons 1 and 2, but substantially more growth has occurred when we see her in season 3. When we pick up with her and with where we end, I'm very much looking forward to that. I don't know how to talk about it without getting too far into it where somebody's going to get mad at me, but just feel very lucky to have made this show and to be a part of something so wonderful for the last 3-4 years, 3 seasons. And I'm looking forward to hopefully speaking with you about that in a few or whenever.
Yeah, I know you can't say much, but I think, being able to make it, and like you said, make it during the pandemic is truly a feat. And I think it's incredible. I guess I would probably want to wrap up with, this show has been so well received. Obviously, it makes sense. It's hard though. There's so much content out there now. So many shows are coming out across so many so even getting eyeballs is difficult, but this show has broken through, and especially for Apple, it broke through early and it got a lot of recognition. What do you think it is about, the show and the content and the characters and the world it brings? What do you think it is about all of that seems to really be resonating with the audience in 2021?
Jane?
I'm still thinking about my answer.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. I don't know about Hailee, but this is, I think this is we're playing real people. We're playing people who are a part of our history. And Mrs. Dickinson has not really been depicted to any great depth prior. So then that gives me a bit of freedom, a bit more freedom. I think for Hailee to get to explore Emily, the famous poet, Emily Dickinson, in such a modern light, and with so much new information that we've learned about Emily, or the experts have put together as what they believe was the true story of Emily Dickinson, is an honor. I've been a big fan of Emily Dickinson's poetry for so long, and it is fun to delve into what I think ultimately is quite a quirky family from back in the day. And I think ultimately this is going to be a show whenever people find it. Hopefully it'll be on the streaming platform for a very long time, because that's what happens now. But I think that we'll be very proud of. Yeah. It's very artistically done. I think everybody performs it beautifully. It's designed beyond. And I think its uniqueness in its storytelling structure can endure, and I feel like I personally will be very proud to have been a part of this show as people find it when they find it.
That makes sense, yeah.
Ooh, same. I will say that I do think part of this show really challenges the way people think about certain things, and I have had the unbelievable opportunity on multiple accounts of meeting younger people who have seen this show and hearing what it is that this show makes them feel. And that to me is, ultimately why I feel like I do what I do. I have those moments where I got to make something that I had so much fun making, that I am so incredibly proud of, that made someone feel less alone, or made someone feel or help them better understand why they're feeling the way they're feeling at a very confusing time in their life. That is something that I think is really awesome about this show. It's made people feel seen. It's challenged the way some people have thought about certain things, or it's helped them alter the way that they think about or feel about certain things. I also think there's elements in this show, from the language to the music, that are very captivating and weird ultimately, which I know I'm into. And I just think that this show has so much going on that it's a hard one not to dive into. And once you do, you get sucked in, and there's a lot of depth to it, which I think once you realize that, it's hard to not acknowledge that and be a fan of that. So I just,
love that. Yeah.
And all beautifully inspired by the words of Emily Dickinson.
That's right.
And her poetry.
Yeah. Well, thank you both so much for being here today, for giving us a sort of peek behind the curtains of Dickinson season 2. It's been such a pleasure to speak to you both, and I'm really excited to get into season 3 hopefully soon. And go through. But right now, I think season 2, especially because many of us probably came to it during the past year, it was a really wonderful show to have during a sort of difficult year where I think a lot of us were, perhaps, or at least I was, going through like identity sort of, things like, what do you do with yourselves when a lot of things are stripped away? And I felt like it was really wonderful to see these characters in this world also kind of going on this journey of discovering themselves. So I love that.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. Appreciate your time today. Thank you for joining us on Conversations at Home.
Of course. Thanks for having us.
Thank you both. This is so great.